take this opportunity to reflect a little bit on what we saw in 2015 and some of the challenges that we would have to address in 2016. We were also in 2015 faced with a number of disasters and humanitarian challenges. In the area of natural disaster response, we already now see good evidence of the capacity building resilience and disaster risk reductions. And we see that governments are better prepared and able to respond to smaller scale emergencies. But we at the same time see population growth, we see an urbanization, and we see the impact of climate change that is exacerbating the disasters and increasing the impact and making new groups vulnerable that were maybe not vulnerable in the past. We started the year with a continuum of the not so traditional UNRWA mission in Western Africa, supporting the humanitarian communities respond to the Ebola affected communities in Sierra Leone, Liberia. And while this was a non-traditional use of the UNRWA system, it is an approach that we have received a lot of good praise for. The fact that we could deploy a coherent team that could operate in this type of environment. And I foresee that this is the type of mission that we will also see in the future increasingly, where we will have to address technical challenges and operate effectively between different types of humanitarian actors. But we also in 2015 had some of the more traditional UNRWA deployments, to mention some, the floods in Malawi, the cyclone affecting the country of Vanuatu, and of course the earthquake in Nepal late April. These were all missions where the UNRWA team, together with other humanitarian partners, demonstrated the added value of an effective rapid response mechanisms that can be deployed to facilitate the immediate assessment, establish coordinations for the incoming relief, and ensure effective information management on site. But furthermore, to link the incoming relief with the national disaster management systems and ensure an effective use of the resources and communicate back to headquarters what are priorities and what are no longer needed. I was recently asked the question, what is the need to continue to bring national UNRWA members on board? And it is with some concern that I get a question like that, because it unfortunately demonstrates to me that the humanitarian community is increasingly basing its approach on lessons that has been learned in the humanitarian crisis or from the humanitarian crisis in Africa and in the Middle East. With the result that instead of coming in and working in support of the national government, we tend to rather replace the effort of the government and establish our own system. If I go back and ask some of the governments that were affected by natural disasters in the recent year what they think of the response we provided, and if they are likely to invite us back, I am convinced that that is not necessarily the case. They all would express concerns that we come in and replaced rather than work in support, and when we are leaving, they are left in an even more complicated situation without that capacity building that we are there to ensure as well. The response in Nepal demonstrated the added value not only of the INSRAC guidelines itself, but also of capacity building at an operational level. In 2009, the INSRAC community held a big earthquake response exercise in Nepal, and that was still in mind of the national authorities when the actual earthquake happened on a Saturday in April. And very swiftly we were able to come in and working with the authorities and setting up the coordination mechanisms. But not only the guidelines, but also the classification process, where we had a level of quality of the teams, enabled us very effectively to set up and coordinate the response in the initial days after the earthquake. And after a few days we could call off the deployment of any further urban search and rescue teams. This approach is now being replicated by the World Health Organization in the process of setting up a similar platform for the coordination of emergency medical teams. This concept will also be placed on a normative approach of guidelines and a quality control process through a classification and standards settings. We will be working very closely with WHO in the development of this to ensure that the two different mechanisms are closely co-aligned. Some of you may think, where are UNDAC and INSRAC and FCSS in general in relation to the World Humanitarian Summit process? There is not mentioning of INSRAC and UNDAC in the current reports as have come out from the summit, but we are there and we have a clear role to play. So far, the World Humanitarian Summit has been very much focusing at the political level, but in May in Turkey, we will be looking forward to engage and share with the participants our operational experience and how the network, the guidelines, methodology has enabled us to ensure effective response in sudden onset emergencies. And we will be very proactively in engaging with also new partners that will be coming to Istanbul to share their experiences and their lessons learned. But before that, in early February, there will be an opportunity for us across the networks to discuss what were the challenges and the lessons we learned in 2015 and how can we better address them in the future. We have deliberately taken the decision not only to focus on network per network, but to work across the network in what we call the Humanitarian Network and Partnership Week, which is taking place here in Geneva 1st to 4th of February. This will bring together more than 12 different networks with the task to discuss how can we improve the response in sudden onset emergencies, as well as how can we better support the ongoing humanitarian crises around the world. OCHA will also be changing in 2016. It has already been announced that the organization will undertake a functional review, and we will of course engage with the consultants been appointed to lead this process to ensure that the roles and responsibilities that the Field Coordination Support Section has been playing will be continued also after a new structure has been identified and been put in place. But it is clear that in this process there are some questions that we need to be able to answer, and we are very much looking forward for your input and your support in answering some of these questions. What does it mean to be a member of INSRAC? What is the capacity that the UNDAC system should have globally to ensure that we can effectively respond to any types of disasters worldwide? What are the numbers of type of humanitarian operational partners that we need to have to ensure that we effectively can deliver support and facilitate the work of the humanitarian agencies on the ground? What is the success criteria and the expected outcome of the professional dialogue where we are bringing the civil protection agencies from Jordan, Israel and Palestine together around a common approach? These and many more questions are something that we all from the Field Coordination Support Section are looking forward to discuss and engage in, and hopefully with your support. I would also like to thank you, all of you, for your support throughout the years, the financial contributions, the resource support, making UNDAC members available, participating in workshop, and giving us critical feedback on the material that has been produced. For example, the INSRAC guideline was a process that took more than 2 years, and it was to ensure that it was a consultative process and the many voices were heard, and it was a combined effort to finalize the guidelines. The same was the case for the OSHA guidelines. And in 2016, we will also be rolling out new training and new programs where we will need your support and engagement. With these words, I would like to wish you all a Happy New Year.